Hello and welcome to my woolly PhD. My name is Liz Scarf and this is a weekly vlog about what I am currently learning and making each week in my anthropology PhD, all about wool, here in Iceland. And I'm a little late with this week's video for whatever reasons, but I'm even a little bit later recording it. I was starting to get it set up, and then someone I'm living with who was going out to something this evening said, "Oh, come outside, it's really pretty." It's had the most amazing Northern Lights show. Oh my goodness. I've seen it a couple of times here, just like a little bit of kind of green smudgy stuff or white smudgy stuff in the sky, but never like this, where it was like pink and gold and green and moving, and it's usually just in one part of the sky. I reckon this was about 310 degrees. There was different things happening. Anyway, it's really sweet too, right? This is my last night on this field trip in the rural area. And so I'm going to Reykjavik tomorrow for 4 days or something. And then I finish this first field trip. So this is exciting. It's my second last video for this field trip, but not at all the second last for the PhD. Still got a few years there. Anyway, this week, excuse me, I'm a little husky. I just had a little throat thing happening. I think you might hear the drinking really loud too because the microphone's just there. My apologies. Anyway, this week I have something particularly fun to share. Oh, there's a bit of light reflecting on it from the... Anyway, if you can see it. This is, for those of you who don't read Icelandic, I also don't, I had to translate it, Aries catalogue. So this is the ram catalogue for this breeding season. It's a shopping magazine for ram semen. And so this is for artificial insemination. There's 2 main artificial insemination stations in Iceland, one in the south and one further up in the west, I think. And so yeah, you can browse the available rams and get yourself some semen for artificial insemination for this season. Anyway, it's both fun, but it's also a really fascinating cultural artifact. So I wanted to use it, just partly to share it because it's really cute. Obviously, I'm not from farming stock. If I was like involved in farming in my own personal life, I would probably not be quite so amused by this, except one of the farmers I was staying with, they said, "Oh no, when we get this, no one answers their phone. Like people are just like in there studying, making notes, who are they going to pick, who are they going to go with? Like it's really, really serious." So I think it's not that farmers are necessarily finding it as amusing as I am, but it's like they're really into it. It's really important, right? Hugely important document. Anyway, but anthropologically, I was going to show you what an outline of a ram it looks like and what's included. And then a bunch of different ways in which we might think about it anthropologically, how we might sort of analyse a document with this without even without even speaking to anyone, right? So this is sometimes something we do in anthropology is we'll analyse cultural artefacts, and they're not always language-based, there could be anything, but they're kind of things, they're objects, they're not necessarily people that we might look at and think about. So anyway, let me introduce you to Frosty. So this cute name, Frosty. I don't want to wreck the magazine. How do I show you this to you? So here's one entry. Here's Frosty and here's Jarl down here. Anyway, but let's look at Frosty. So here's the map of Iceland, and then there's a little dot. This is where Frosty's from, over in the west. And this number up here is Frosty's birth year, 22. So Frosty's had a couple of seasons. So Frosty's got a bit more data than, say, who is this? Hlida, who is just born this last season. So hasn't actually done any mating or fathering, siring, anyone yet. So there's a bit less information about him. Now, also, so yeah, there's some interesting genetic information here, these little green things. They're colour-coded throughout the whole document. And then there's a guide inside. There's actually an educational kind of bit in the middle that talks about the genetics. So these genetics are specifically about genetic resistance to a neurological disease here called scrapie. Really worth looking up. If you've watched that beautiful, beautiful Icelandic film called Rams, that's the disease that is afflicting the flock in the Rams movie. So basically it's a neurological disease that develops over several years caused by prions, which are enfolded proteins, whatever that is. So it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria. And generally it's meant that a whole flock is slaughtered and lost, even if the whole flock is not symptomatic, because it's such a big deal, right? And so in Iceland, some parts of the country are not affected by it, and there's natural barriers, big rivers and glaciers, basically, I think, so that the flocks that the regions where it does exist are separated from the regions where it doesn't. So there's rules about what you can and can't sort of transport across the country in terms of sheep and fleece and a range of things you have to do. So there's biosecurity measures in place to stop the spread of it across the whole of Iceland. And a little while ago, this is the story I've heard, I haven't really looked into this very much. There's a woman who really campaigned for genetic testing for resistance. And one of the issues is when you respond to a disease outbreak, or even just one sheep with it, by slaughtering the whole flock, you don't get to see if anybody's naturally immune. And so there's been a lot of work going into checking and finding out, does anyone have genetic immunity, and how do we keep sort of fostering this across generations, so that's one way to actually, because you can't necessarily eliminate scrapie, but to make the population of sheep immune to it, so it's not a problem anymore. So that's what these markers are about. Now, Hlida here is ideal if you are looking for scrapie genetic resistance. He's got both. He's got 2 of the genetic markers for it, which means 100% all his offspring will get 1. And you only need 1 to be immune to scrapie. But if you paired him with a ewe that had 1, not 2, the probabilities are that half of her offspring will have it, half won't. So ideally, if you want to guarantee that kind of genetic transmission, you would breed Hlida to a ewe that has 2 of these. Anyway, that's probably getting to be an ideal scenario for people. I don't know how many generations off the flocks are for that, but it's not the only thing people are really breeding for, of course, too, right? So anyway, that's that. So Frosty's not as good a bet as Hlida if that's your priority. Anyway, we also have here a family tree where we can see Frosty's parents and the parents of Frosty's parents. And the information that's there in the tree, pretty much all the rams have names and a number. There's maybe at least one exception. I haven't tallied it up, but you could do the stats on it. The ewes a bit more of a mix. Mostly they only have numbers. Some have names, but the trend is definitely that the rams have names, the ewes kind of less so. And this is in part because many farmers don't name their sheep. But we might also think about it as something about the prioritising of patrilineal genes. I don't know. Interesting. I don't know enough about that to sort of say, what does that mean? Now, the written descriptions here and the charts of data, and there's also these scores, a bunch of scores that are given. These are all communicating about the appearance and conformation of the ram, his body composition. Frosty apparently to Google Translate, and actually I had somebody confirm this translation, is magnificently fleshy. Oh, Frosty. Anyway, there's also a little bit of a line about wool quality. It's not as high a priority for breeding for many farmers in Iceland. It is for some, of course, who are really focused on wool, but for the majority it's not. So there's not a lot of information kind of communicated about that. And there's also, for those who've already got a breeding record, which is Frosty does, Leda doesn't because Leda's a newer ram. It'll also describe how fertile his daughters are and also the meat quality of his sons. So again, how magnificently fleshy were his sons. So there's that information. And the listings don't tend to mention anything about the ram's sort of behavioural tendencies or temperament. I'm not sure why, but they are, maybe it's because they're artificial insemination rams, so they won't be having social contact with flocks. So maybe it's less important. I don't know. Temperament's very important if a ram is going to be part of your flock. So the focus overall is on sort of genetics for disease resistance, body composition and fertility. And of course, there is the glamour shot with the little back leg popped back. Most of them are posing like that. And they're pretty cute. Frosty looks like he's been to like a hairdresser, like a dog groomer, but it was like the work experience kid or something who did Frosty's cut. So not the finest fleece outline that is in the magazine, but excuse me, possibly not the most important thing we're looking for. Okay. And the names are funny. They're really sweet. Someone is called Ryomi, which is cream, means cream. And oddly enough, there is a Harry in here. The rest seem to me to be Icelandic names, more or less. I'm talking about Frosty. Yeah, probably from the Bifrost. Anyway, but also there is a Potter in here as well. And so I was like, oh, no, don't tell me. Are they twins or are they from the same father? They don't seem to be related or from the same farm. But you know, Harry and Potter appearing in the same catalogue, I'm not sure. There is another one here called Bonus or Bonus. Not sure how they pronounce it here. But Bonus is the name of the cheapest grocery store, like the bargain grocery store here. I'm not especially sure about the wisdom of naming one's ram, and these are high quality rams, Bonus. Like the fancy grocery store is Netto. Netto at least. Anyway, who knows? They're pretty cute. Oh, I just saw a Brutus. Okay, I want to stop. Okay, so I've been very entertained by this. You know, I'm even looking at this front cover, right? This is an interesting diversity shot, actually, because the majority of rams in this catalogue and the majority of sheep in Iceland are white. And so interesting that we have at least 3 not white. Sometimes a white sheep is not a completely white sheep, but I think the one in there is. And also the majority have got horns, which they do here too, that maybe there's one polled, maybe not. Anyway, an interesting diversity shot of colours, given that it's not a high priority for a lot of farmers. Oh, excuse me. Okay, what can we do with it anthropologically? There's a lot, actually. So here's just a few things. This is, of course, a great document to chat with farmers about. But if we just wanted to study it on its own, we can look at kinship and descent theory. So this is maybe one of the most obvious things, right? So anthropologists study how different cultures trace kinship, right? This is through patrilineal, matrilineal, or bilateral systems. And a RAM catalogue, it's essentially a tool for managing patrilineal descent in sheep populations, helping people make explicit decisions about bloodlines and pedigree and genetic inheritance. So, you know, it ties into sort of kinship theory. Also the anthropology of biotechnology and reproduction, right? So in this field, anthropology examines how reproductive technologies reshape relationships between humans, animals and nature. And so artificial insemination, right, it represents a separation of reproduction from mating, and really raises questions about how farmers are conceptualizing paternity, genetic contribution, the commodification of reproductive capacity, and also shifting definitions of what makes a good father, potentially too, right? What's productive semen versus behavioural traits? There's nothing in here about behavioural traits. Another angle we might look at it from is commodity exchange and value. So the catalogue, you know, presents semen as a commodity with a specific exchange values, specific criteria for value. People might be valuing different things from different kinds of semen now, right? It's not about the ram anymore. They've kind of been separated. And so in anthropology, we can study how things become commodified and how value is socially constructed. So what makes one ram's genetics worth more than another's sort of reflects cultural priorities about productivity and aesthetics and genetic quality, and also like economic outcomes, right? The more magnificently fleshy, you're going to be able to sell your carcasses for more, or your live rams usually selling off. Anyway, get what I mean? So human animal studies is another direction, right? So this looks at the sort of co-constitutive, take three, co-constitutive, I don't think I've got that right. Anyway, it's collaborative relationships between humans and animals. So the catalogue kind of mediates this relationship, right? Showing how humans exert political control over animal populations, but also being highly dependent on animal bodies for economic survival. And of course, culturally, we've also got to say it's not just about economic survival, right? It's like, who is an Icelandic farmer? You know, somebody who farms sheep. Not necessarily, not all farmers farm sheep here, but it's very strong in the cultural identity to farm sheep. So I think it's not just about economic survival, but also about cultural survival too, and cultural resilience. And how the sheep are kind of essential. And Icelandic sheep are essential for that for Icelanders. Another area is sort of scientific knowledge in general, and knowledge practices, right? So the catalogue embodies a particular way of knowing animals, right? Through measurements, through genetic data, through standardised descriptions, but not about direct observation and relationship, right? I'm not in the room with the ram, I'm not hanging out with it, I'm not watching it in a paddock, I'm not watching it socialise with other animals. And this connects to anthropological studies of how scientific practices kind of shape human-animal interactions. And if you watched last week's video, like when I mentioned how time and attention can sort of transform our relationality with animals, right? From objects to subjects, that we can come to recognise their personhood. A catalogue like this and the context around it probably doesn't engender the recognition of Frosty's personhood. So is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know, it's not my main launching off point with this, but it has implications, right? For human-animal relationships and how, well, so many different things, right? Another angle on this is masculinity and virility. So there's an interesting, I think, symbolic territory here about how cultures construct and value male reproductive capacity. In here it's in a livestock context. And it's still very interesting, right? If we think about livestock as these are persons or actors within the social milieu of a culture. Yeah, I think it could be a really interesting direction to study. But because I'm particularly interested in post-human lenses, well, am I? Yeah, I am particularly, but not only. If we thought about it, sort of added an additional kind of little bit of a post-humanist tint to it, we could also sort of say that that kind of approach sort of disrupts the human-animal binary here and would examine how the RAM catalogue actually creates like cyborg assemblages. And this is like hybrid networks where sort of the biological RAM bodies, human breeders, frozen semen, the artificial insemination equipment, the databases, the genetic information systems all become sort of inseparably entangled. Thinking about the ultrasound machines that are used to do a lot of these assessments, the universities where people are learning how to do them, like it entangles a whole range of bodies and technologies and systems. Also distributed agency, right? So if we thought about it from this perspective, like instead of just thinking that humans are the only ones who have agency in this context, we could also understand that reproductive decisions aren't made solely by human farmers, but emerge from complex relationships between ram genetic potentials and bodily capacities. Technological infrastructure, so the freezing, the storage, the transportation, even the location, right? Like depending on where you are in Iceland, are you going to go to the facility in the south because it's close, or the one in the west because it's close? That's going to direct, well, I don't want to go to the one in the west, it's too far. I do like that ram, but I don't think so. I've got to go to the one in the south, so I've only got these ones to pick from, right? So geographical location is now directing reproductive decisions. Also market forces and breed standards. So the used bodies and their reproductive cycles are part of this too. So the used genetic information, when are they in heat ready to breed? This is partly also why location matters, like how long have you got? Because you've got to go get the semen, come back. Once you're detected, you've got the right ewe in, I think this is how it works, got the right ewe in heat, go off and get the semen, get back, get her inseminated. And so, the travel distance anyway. Also climate and environmental conditions. Right, I think, when are they going to be doing this? December? I don't know. It's cold. It's not always easy to drive around anyway. Sometimes the weather conditions mean you can't go pick up some semen. Yeah. So, the whole range of factors where agency, like the ability to affect the world, is at play, right? It's not just about what humans think they want and what they want and what they can actually execute, or enact. Another element is this notion of biosocial sort of becoming that maybe links to Donna Haraway's concept of becoming with, right? So rams and sheep flocks are quite literally co-evolving with human agricultural practices and technologies. Like the genetic resistance to scrapie is one very, very clear example of this. And how sort of neither species exist independently. They're mutually constituted through these reproductive interventions, right? Like the human's effort for scrapie resistance is really beneficial for sheep, actually. It means they're going to live longer, they get to reproduce. I think also when they get slaughtered is probably, I was going to say, not fun. So they're saved from this kind of experiences. So there's a range of different ways in which these are interdependent relationships that are kind of described in this catalogue. I also think about post-human kinship. So before, when I mentioned about patrilineal, matrilineal, bilateral kind of kinship things, right, we're talking about human, but what if we thought about post-human kinship and multi-species kinship networks, right? So thinking about this kind of challenges a more traditional kinship model. The RAM catalogue engenders or creates this kind of multi-species kinship network. So the relatedness isn't just about human family structures or sheep family structures, but about these interwoven sort of genetic, economic and ecological relationships that are crossing species boundaries, right? And it's not just one way of humans deciding something. The sheep are kind of also saying, well, hey, you want magnificently fleshy and scrapie resistance. Well, so there's this kinship mixes with agency too, right? Also, the technologically mediated body, I think, is a really interesting thing here, right? Because the ram becomes fragmented. His genetics are kind of separated from his physical presence. It's distributed across space and time through cryopreservation. And this kind of questions notions of bodily integrity and presence that underpin maybe a bit of humanist thinking. And also really, I think this is a really interesting link to when we look at the ways in which IVF and other fertility treatments in humans separate out component body parts and fertilization. I think there's a lot of actually really interesting anthropological work on IVF technologies. If you're interested in something like that, I really recommend it. Super interesting. Anyway, I think there's some good or interesting parallels, but because I think it gets really kind of fraught if we start comparing. It's not about comparing, but I think this fragmentation of the body from parts and things is really, it's really interesting, and it's got some similarities. Anyway, also the biopolitics sort of beyond the human. So if you've ever, so I was going to have the joy, I'm sure joy is the right word, read any of Michel Foucault, great work and very, I think, important in anthropology in some areas. His concept of biopower really extends here, and this is, and some scholars kind of extend this to talk about zoo power. Biopower is really the management of life and death, in the sense who gets to decide who and what is living for how long and in what kind of standards. But zoo power is a little bit more in this direction of the management of animal life and death, productivity and reproduction at sort of these population levels. So, if you're still with me in this video, well done. All that from this gorgeous RAM catalogue. And there would be heaps more. Like, it's just, I don't know. Documents can be incredibly generative anthropological sources. Like, it's easy to think anthropology is lots of hanging out with people. It's not only, right? We're often looking at a lot of kind of documents and items and objects. You know, one anthropological method is you follow an object, which is a lot of what my study is around following wool. But of course, we don't just do that. People are part of it, other animals, whatever else. But anyway, I thought that was fun, and I really can't put my finger on why this makes me smile so much. Like, I just look at it and go, so cute. And there's something about the naming of the rams, right? I think this is where the cuteness thing is getting triggered or sort of stimulated in me. I have to think on that further. I don't know. If you think you know why I think it's so entertaining and why I'm like, oh, look at Spadi or Sproti. Yeah, let me know your thoughts if you've got any idea why you think I'm just having so much fun with this. Okay, so that's what I've been thinking about this week. And I also just have to acknowledge there were some very, very knowledgeable sheep farmers who helped me understand this document more. So I don't reveal names and sources here, but you know who you are. Thank you very much. So what have I been making this week? Well, I've had some furious making, not furious as in mad, but like extended, dedicated knitting time, and then also then times when I couldn't. I have only been working on the Alfeda sweater by Jennifer Steingast that I have been working on for a while, using Plutalopi from Thingborg, and it's too big. I didn't swatch. It's unlike me to not swatch, so there is no need to sing the praises of swatching. It was a bad life decision. I'd like to think I've learnt my lesson. Will I make a sweater again without swatching? Like, I make socks and scarves, and you don't have to swatch for this business. I'd like to say I didn't know what I was thinking, but I did know what I was thinking. Anyway, it was a bad choice, and so I'm a little bit bummed about it. It has taken the wind out of my sails a little bit for it, because I'm also making it for my daughter. She already knows. I don't have to give her a warning. She already knows it's too big. She's still thrilled to be getting a sweater. I have not made her one yet. So what I do know is this is not going to be the first because it's too big. So I have finished the body, and I have finished the first sleeve, and it is stunning. I have to say, I think it is stunning. I love the design, the yoke, and I love the colour. Oh, the computer screen is making it a bit blue. I can just pop that down. Oh, there we go. It's a bit more true to colour. It's so lovely, and I have to say, I love Plutalopi. Oh my goodness, it's so nice. It's really dense, and I'm wondering that it might actually be too warm for people living in Melbourne. It's quite warm, but it's too big, and I forgot to go down a needle size on the ribbing. So I got mixed feelings about it. I love it, and I'm just a little bit disappointed in myself. It's okay. I'll get over it. It happens. I think it's more because it's my daughter. If it was just for me, I'd just be like, oh, yeah, rack it up to, and she will love it anyway. But anyway, so yeah, depending on what she thinks about it, once I get it on her, I might Frankenstein it when I get back home to Melbourne. One thing I'm thinking, do let me know if you think this is an absolutely another bad choice, is I was thinking, like, it's in the round, but I could make it raglan, right? It's too big here. There probably needs 2 of these removing, right? And I had thought, you know, I could cut it down the back here, take some of that out and pop a button, and it's just got like a keyhole opening at the back. That could be really cute. But then it's going to just kind of pull across the back or the front. It's not going to kind of even it out. So then the idea is like, oh, you could take some across the top of the shoulder. That's not going to, what's that going to do on the sleeve? And then somebody suggested, hey, you could turn it into a raglan kind of thing. Because what I've been thinking is I could cut some out and then I could felt it together actually. And I could put some fibre on the back and felt it together. So I don't know. I'm going to see what my daughter thinks. If she's just happy with it and just like, nah, leave it, I'll leave it. I could also pop it in a washing machine for a very short amount of time and see if it'll shrink up a little bit. Anyway, all of these things have risks with them, of course, so I will leave it up for her to decide. And yes, I am going to finish it by the end of this week. So I just got 1 sleeve left to go. I must say, I really, really did not like knitting the sleeves on this. I was so grumpy. I don't know whether it was because I felt a time pressure. It was a bit fiddly and difficult to get started on it. Maybe I was knitting too tight. I don't know, but I don't usually mind sleeves. It was a grumpy sleeve. Anyway, okay. This is a long video this week because I had a lot to say about that catalogue. I hope you found it interesting. And yes, if you've got any thoughts on the sweater or why I'm so tickled by the Ram catalogue, yeah, let me know. Sometimes I don't know how to finish and say goodbye. So goodbye. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.